Children and babies sleeping on coats or towels on the floor. That's the reality of Britain's bed poverty crisis. One charity estimates just under 1 million children are living in bed poverty, where they're forced to sleep in broken or damaged beds if they have one at all, or share them with others. I'm Geraint Vincent, and this is What You Need to Know. Well, hello. Today I'm joined by our North of England reporter, Amy Welch, who's been unearthing some of the shocking conditions children are forced to endure at home. Welcome, Amy. I mean, I think we better start with, it's the first time I've heard the expression this morning, bed poverty. Amy, so just take us through what exactly we're talking about. Well,
Geraint, I think it's fair to say that having your own bed to sleep in is something we all take for granted, and yet nearly 1 million children in the UK just don't have that. Now, they are either sharing a bed, they're living in a bed that's broken, they might even be sleeping on the floor. It might be that their mums or dads can't afford to wash or dry their bedding because they can't afford to pay for the energy to do that. And shocking as it is a crisis which is showing no sign of getting any better. And that is what we mean by this term, bed poverty.
I've just watched your report. It left me open-mouthed, but just tell us about the scale of the problem, as far as you're aware.
Well, we understand that it is just under 1 million children that are living in bed poverty, but the situation is just not getting any better. Now, Zarac is a charity based in Leeds that I went to film with, and they work with around 750 schools across West Yorkshire and beyond. And when they opened 6 years ago, they were delivering about 150 beds every single year. Now that figure is 4,000 beds a year. Next year, they're expecting it to be 5,000. So this problem is only getting worse. They have just handed out their 10,000th bed. Now, they actually said to me, they're a charity that doesn't want to exist. They don't want to be here. But right now, without them, children would be in a far worse situation.
And it's often indicative of really severe poverty, isn't it? Tell me about some of the most shocking cases you came across.
Well, I mean, the idea of just sleeping on the floor, and it is shocking enough, but I actually heard stories of children sleeping on coats, sleeping on sheets, sleeping curled up next to the radiator in the landing or in the hall, because that is the warmest part of their house. One charity told me that they even had a case of a child sleeping in a bath. Can you imagine that, having to sleep in a bath? And it's the levels of poverty that these people are experiencing, which is just so heartbreaking. You know, people having to pay for food, for nappies, rent, formula, and after all of that, believe it or not, a bed is seen as a luxury.
Now, one of the great things about your work on this is you've got people to talk to you, Amy, who are obviously feeling very embarrassed. One of them, talked about how they were ashamed of themselves. There's a real stigma surrounding this issue, isn't there?
There really is, and this is a story that I've wanted to cover for some time and haven't been able to because of that reason. But I think the reason I'd like to think yourself, and indeed the reason I do the job that I do, is that I like to think that if we highlight an issue, we can actually draw attention to it and actually bring about some real change. You know, that is why we all do this job at ITV News. But people do understandably feel ashamed that they can't provide those things for their children. And even though in the majority of these cases, this poverty they're experiencing is through no fault of their own. But without the support of charities, they would be struggling even more.
Now, one lady you met was a woman called Destiny. Tell us her story, can you?
So Destiny's a mum of two. She's originally from Nigeria. She now lives in Leeds. She's here on a postgraduate visa. She is at university. Her husband works full-time. The rent on their Leeds flat is about £800 a month. She has two gorgeous boys who had bunk beds, and the bunk beds broke. You know, perhaps you or I would think, right, well, you go and get a replacement bunk bed. But even a second-hand one, she was telling me, would cost at least £600 to £800. A new one would cost £1,000. And that is spare cash that they simply didn't have. And you can see some of the pictures being played now, that Destiny, she did feel ashamed and she didn't want to show her face because of that stigma that we have just talked about.
You also went to a school where the teachers, members of staff there, are having to deal with the effects of bed poverty in the classroom.
That's right. Now, this school was absolutely fantastic. It was based in Wakefield, an area where 6,000 children are estimated to be living in bed poverty, huge amounts of deprivation there. Now, this school, Simpsons Lane Academy. The teacher there showed me a corner of the classroom that has bean bags and coats and blankets in it, because some children have to come to school and just go straight to sleep because they are so exhausted, they're so tired. And she said that they have already referred 8 families since the start of September to this charity that I've just been referring to, called ZARAC, to provide their children with a bed.
I mean, we use the expression "sleep like a baby," don't we? But I mean, some of these children are really suffering, and you know, the mental and physical impact when you're a child of not getting enough sleep is serious, isn't it?
I mean, if you think about myself or you not getting any sleep, I'm sure we...
Well, I've got an 18-month-old at home, so I know something about that at the moment.
No, we wouldn't be functioning too well either. But yeah, can you imagine your child going to school? You know, they're meant to be trying to learn, but how can they learn when they are this exhausted? Now, teachers told me that the children are exhausted, they are lacking motivation, and the charity ZARAC actually went as far as to say to me that they believe childbed poverty is a health condition and that it needs to be taken more seriously. And
for really young babies, there's a separate set of concerns?
Well, it's separate and the same in a way. I guess it's just even perhaps more shocking. I mean, can you imagine being due, you know, expecting to give birth and not knowing where your baby is actually going to sleep, you know, not being able to afford a Motus basket? But that is the situation facing so many families. Now, in Manchester, I met Luke and Alexis. Now, Alexis is actually due to give birth any day now, and they've also got an 11-month-old who's sleeping in a cot that's broken. He keeps trying to climb out and he's starting to hurt himself because of that.
When it comes to like looking at cots and Moses baskets and stuff, it's just, they're a lot of money. They'd have to be in our bed, but then we've got our newborn and that's just not safe at all.
I asked Luke how it made him feel, you know, not being able to afford these things for his son, and he described it as shameful. Those are the words that he used, which absolutely, you know, I just found completely heartbroken, because he could see the love that he had for his family and that he really just wanted to be able to give him everything in, you know, in the whole world. Now, they fortunately have been gifted a Moses basket and a cot from a charity based in Manchester called Little Green Socks. Now, the last year they handed out around 80 Moses baskets and cots, but they're only really quite a small charity, and there are around 300 of these baby banks who provide all sorts of things, you know, bedding, clothes, toys to families in need. And the Baby Bank Alliance told me that in this year alone, one baby bank has handed out 60 Moses baskets, another's given out another 80. You know, the list goes on. We're getting into thousands here, thousands of cots and Moses baskets that are having to be handed out to people, which is not a situation that we should be in.
But I mean, I guess it's an emergency requirement, because there's real safety issues about co-sleeping with a very small baby or a newborn, isn't there? What are some of the pathways out of this then? How are we going to fix the situation?
Well, I guess one big concern, which I know we've talked about a lot on ITV News, is the 2-child benefit cap. That's not helping matters. You know, that is something the government doesn't seem to want to budge on, but big charities like Bernardo say if that was lifted, you know, that would make a big difference. But another big issue with all of this is that a lot of these families wait an awful long time to get into a social house, and then when they finally get the key, you know, this is the day when you know, their life is going to change and they're going to get in there. There's no cooker, there's no carpet, there's no sofa, there is certainly no bed. And there's a charity called End Furniture Poverty who says that needs to change. Now, they are campaigning, they're lobbying the government to make all social landlords be obliged to provide at least 10% of their properties with furniture. Now, that might not seem like a lot, but it would actually be the equivalent of 400,000 homes. And they really say it's time for the government to actually do something about this.
And have you seen any signs that the government's got a plan? Is it on their agenda at all?
Well, I spoke to government sources who just wouldn't be drawn on whether that is something that they're going to consider. Their own figures show that 4.3 million children are thought to be living in poverty, which is around 30% of all children. Now, they have sent me a statement saying that no child should be in poverty, and they are very excited about their child poverty task force that's working on a strategy that is going to supposedly eradicate some of these problems. And some of the headlines in that are free breakfast clubs, lowering debt repayment rates, extending something known as the Household Support Fund, which helps families with the cost of essentials. Now, the problem, charities tell me, is the use of that word essential, because right now a bed is not seen as essential. And if that is the case, then we're in serious trouble here, and this is just not going to change.
Amy, it's revelatory, really powerful reporting. Thanks so much for telling us about it. And you can see Amy's full report on the website and ITVX. And please look back over some of our most recent podcasts for quick briefings on a range of subjects. But for now, thanks for joining us.